outrageous. Free.
Welcome back to a Celtic state of mind. You might be asking why on earth are 4 Celtic fans smiling? That doesn't happen too often. I am Paul John Dykes. I'm delighted to be. We're smiling because Kevin and John and I are being joined by Acsom. You're back. You're back in the fold. You will have plenty to talk about, big man, and great to see you. And congratulations as well, Acsom. Fantastic to see you enjoying life, mate.
Thank you, Paul John. Not great. We were just saying off here. First time I've been on in a while. First time I've actually been on with John. So it's like a bucket list goal ticked off there to be on with Big John. But no, I've had a busy summer, so I might be a bit rusty. No pre-season. So I've got Kev and John to kind of carry me through. But no, it's been brilliant. Had my wedding. All went well. Honeymoon. So it's been fantastic. And then obviously coming back to Celtic Park on Sunday. Not as much fun after watching that performance, but good to be back at Celtic Park nonetheless.
Oh, brilliant. I'm just waiting for either OK or hello to be released with the images. Acsom, as long as it's no hello. Now, I'm going to come to you, John Hughes. I'm coming to you.
I just want to say, because I say this to everyone that's on with me for the first time, we need to keep up the tradition. It's a tremendous honour for you, Acsom.
You also said that to Chris Sutton in Belfast as well. Yeah. Acsom, Park Keed couldn't have been too bad. You're still there, but you were also there to speak to Brendan. I'm going to kick off with that. You spoke to Brendan Rodgers after the game. You were a wee bit surprised, I think, by his reaction to it. But I think when you're watching his reaction compared to the reaction of the Rangers manager after match day 1, that would have been, I think, in Brendan's mind as well, Acsom.
Yeah, as ever with Brendan, everything he says is quite calculated, with a certain intent. I'll be honest, first time obviously speaking to you guys in a while, but you go into the new season full of hope and ambition, and you're looking forward to it. But sadly, just with the lack of recruitment and exciting transfers, everyone kind of went into Sunday obviously looking forward to Flag Day, but you look at that lineup, you look at the squad depth at the moment, and I don't think anyone was overly surprised by the performance. I don't think it was terrible, but it wasn't very inspiring. It was a late winner, which is always good, but throughout the game, we're not creating, an awful lot of great chances. The wide areas are not looking as strong as they should be. So when I went into the press conference at the end, I thought Rodgers would kind of echo what a lot of us fans thought, which was it wasn't a very good performance. But I think, as you mentioned, it was almost calculated. He couldn't have been happy with that performance. But the whole kind of mood in the press conference, it seemed like he was almost briefed maybe to say to act a certain way as well. Because even when it came to, he was asked about how he feels about the Champions League qualifier coming up, how he feels the squad's ready for it. And again, he gave a very brief answer saying, yeah, good. He's happy with how everything's going, which didn't seem to mirror what he was saying on Friday. So yeah, it just seems all a bit, confusing at the moment as to what our actual plans are and how ready we are for this huge qualifier in a couple of weeks.
I think Acsom says something really important and pivotal in that whole respect. I'm going to throw this over to you, Kev. You've watched Celtic and the operation closely for a number of years. After firing a few shots the other week there in terms of recruitment and not being a manager who maintains, and not just saying it once, it wasn't like a fluid, natural answer that Brendan gave when he was talking about being a manager who wants to progress, because he used the same language at least 2 times, depending on which press conference you watched. He probably has been briefed going into that post-match, Kev, because that's the way the club works, isn't it?
It is the way the club works, but it could also just be Brendan saying, right, I've said what I want to say. I'm going to concentrate on the players here. As Acsom quite rightly says, that everything that Brendan does is calculated. And so he had his pot shot on Friday, then on Sunday focused on the players. And I think there was an interview where he says he was fed up talking about transfers as well. I don't know where that came from. He can't come out and say that I want wingers, I want a striker, and I want this and that when he's trying to work with the guys that he's got there. But privately, he will be he should be pushing that demand up the stairs to those who get the deals done, saying that we really need these guys in the building now. And we've got more clarity now of who we're actually playing and the chance, we've got a puncher's chance, more than a puncher's chance of getting into the Champions League. Eh? So we should now be going like, right, we think we've got a measure of these teams if we actually strengthen in the areas that we need strengthened, and we will get our money back, even though we've got that money there. If they're having a look at it, if the accountants are having a look at it, we can go, well, we're going to get 40 million back here, so we can spend 40 million. We will, eh? They can also point to that they've got the 23 million, whatever it is, currently came in for the transfer fees. I noticed that like folks say, oh, when will we start spending? So if you look at the last 20 years, we've usually started spending after we know what European competition we're in, or when we actually sell a player. So we've currently sold a player and nothing seems to have been happening. Now we know the task that's in front of us to get into the Champions League. So, well, have a look at it now. Let's start pushing things through. I really do think, after thinking about it for the last couple of days, I don't think the players that we've been linked with over the last couple of weeks are the ones that we're actually looking at, because nothing's happened whatsoever with any of these guys. And it could be that a lot of flack's getting put onto the guys at the recruitment deals, but it could just be that we weren't really, yes, we've asked about these boys, but they're one of many targets that are actually out there, and which is the way football clubs actually run. There's not just one, there'll only be 2 wingers that we really want. There'll be a choice of 6 or 7 wingers that are there, that are gettable, all with different pricings. The only thing that I'm really, really quite worried about is the centre midfield. And I says that on Sunday. And one of the things that I came out with on Sunday was that midfield just does not look right to me against better opposition. There was something really got to me about that midfield on Sunday. The balance just didn't look right at all.
Did you agree with the starting midfield, Kev? With Rio and Nigren ahead of Callum McGregor? I
did, aye, but I think our midfield's been ignored. I think there's been an elephant in the room ignored for long enough, which is Callum McGregor. And we need a big physical presence in there to allow 2 more creative midfielders to actually play against better sides. And that can mean moving McGregor slightly forward. It doesn't mean dropping Callum McGregor. It could just mean a slight change of position. But we're all shouting for wingers and a striker. I'm looking at that midfield going, nobody's actually had a look at that midfield and went, we need something else in there for years.
Is that because of the numbers, Kev? More than the quality of the actual numbers we've got in midfield, it looks like we're well covered in there, doesn't it?
It looks like we're well covered, but we've got the same type of player. And that seems to be a massive problem with the scouting. We scout a certain type of player who doesn't really seem to fit the way that we play.
I've said this before, and a lot of people disagree, John, but I'm going to ask you for your view, and I'm sure you'll sit on the fence for this one. When we're talking about defensive mids and big, strong, physical midfield players, we've been talking about that for years on here. I remember going into Ange Postecoglou's first Champions League campaign, talking to Alan Morrison about it, and he was talking about a profile of a midfielder that we were lacking back then, going into the Champions League games against the likes of Real Madrid. We're still having a conversation, and Kev's got the concerns about Callum, and it's not because of Callum's performance. He's just wanting more beef and physicality in the midfield. Do we have a midfielder at the club, do you think, who could be that physical presence? Because I've said it, as I say on here before, I've been kind of fired down, I've been knocked off my perch after saying it. I think Engels is the most natural fit, but I don't think the aggression comes naturally to him, John.
Yeah, well, it has been a problem, as you say, but I mean, we got rid of Awata, for instance, because we don't play with a defensive mid. And I don't think he's even looking for one, in that sort of role. We've said it for a while, and mainly because when we have bad performances, our midfield looks like it's being overrun. And that's usually a systemic problem that's team-wide and not just about the midfield. But, it is... we need more athleticism, power and pace throughout the team. I would... if we have a choice of where to start, Kev, I mean, again, I think it's just priorities, because we're not going to get players in. I'll be delighted at this point if we get wingers in and a striker in. At least you could get 2 left wingers and a right winger in, and then play Maeda through the middle, which it takes care of the striker problem for the most part, because then you'd have Vida and Shin on the bench, and that's a decent enough 3, I'm assuming, because we didn't get to see Shin. But going back to your original point, Kev, about waiting to sign players till you see what competition you're in. This year, with 1 qualifier, that is insanity. Absolute insanity. We're 1 qualifier away, and we're giving them an opportunity to beat us. We are weaker than we were last year when we played them. And, Bratislava, I'm assuming, was going to win it. Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing.
I think it's wild decision. And what it means to me is, apart from the fact I think it's a massive slap in the face to the fans, I think it's so lacking in any sort of vision or courage. It's just lacking in backing of the manager. But what it means is, if we get through the Champions League, this will be the last time we're in the Champions League for a good few years. Because if they're not going to back us for 1 game against unseeded, weak opposition that we've previously beaten, what's the chances they're going to back the manager for 3 qualifiers against quality opposition? Which is what we're facing in the next few years. So if we get through, we better enjoy it, because we'll not be there again for a long time, potentially, depending on how the coefficient goes.
It just feels a bit like deja vu for me, because how many times in seasons gone by have we been in this situation where we get to qualifiers and we're just woefully unprepared? We've got Nir Bitton playing centre half, we've got James Forrest playing centre forward. Teams have beaten us: Athens, Maribor, Cluj, Ferencvaros. You can list the names of teams that have beaten us simply because we've been unprepared for these qualifiers. And John's right, we've got a draw, a favourable draw, out of the options that we could have had, but it's no gimme. And when we lost to Bayern that night back in February, and I think we were all proud of the team's performance that night, and we all thought, we're a few quality signings away from progressing further forward. What have we done since then? Lost one of our most creative sparks in Kuhn, and done pretty much nothing else. I know Kieran Tierney's came in, and that'll be hopefully a good signing, but yeah, it's baffling, as both Kev and John have said, that we're in this situation again where I was not worried about the qualifiers back then, because I thought we look like a good team now. But again, I'm going into that qualifier against Bratislava thinking, of course we should win, we should have more than enough. But how many times have we said that before, where it's just been a lack of preparation, and it's just baffling. That look at the wide areas. Brendan Rodgers said that one of his strengths in his teams is the wide attacking areas. He said that on Friday. He said it last week as well. We're back to what we had 2 years ago when we had all those problems, when it was Palma and Yang, and the summer where we signed about 5 wingers, but not one of them were good enough. You look at our options right now, it's Dyson Maeda, James Forrest, Yang. That's what we're looking at right now, 2 weeks away from this tie against Bratislava or Kairat. It's just simply not good enough.
No, John makes the point there, which is a really, really good point. And we're talking about, after this year, we're going to come into, three qualifiers that we're going to need to get into the Champions League. Doesn't matter if we win the league or finish second. I think all going in the same pot, or is it by an extra? Whatever it is, right? So we count on this prize money. So surely the club should be looking at it going, that, by the way, if we invest this year and get in again and get that prize pot, then it should make next year slightly easier to actually get through to get that prize pot again. You look at all the cluster of teams that we should be aiming for, like your Bruges, your Feyenoords, and I'm trying to picture what was on Alan Morrison's wee graphic, the article that he had up the other day. The ones that we should be aiming for, like your Zagrebs and guys like that. And Copenhagen was the other one. They've all spent big in the summer, because they realise, by the way, we've got a shot at basically what is a European league and riches that are game-changing riches. So we're going to try and make sure that these qualifiers are maybe 70-30 in our favour when we actually go into them. But what we're trying to do is we're making them 50-50. We're going, well, we'll wait and see instead of having a look at maybe the longer term and going, this could be the last year that we've got a kind of simple shot at this. I
think the level of dysfunction, this was something we thought maybe had passed us by last year when he signed Engels, Nida, and looked like, we'd moved away from the biscuit tin. But then you find out how those signings took place, why they were so expensive, what was happening behind the scenes. There's just more dysfunction. And it just looks this year as if absolutely nothing has changed. And this is why I've always said, basically, Ange was the only person who could have got us out the hole we were in back when he did, because he was the only person who had that kind of specialised knowledge of a market nobody had really tapped. And all those players were within parameters for what the board are prepared to spend, which is hee-haw. So they say they backed Ange, but they backed him with peanuts. You know what I mean? So from that point, Ange's signings declined because, he can't just keep producing Japanese players. So his own knowledge and his own contacts weren't sufficient. And what we had at the club was the likes of Lowell Jr. And again, that is now being replicated almost, it seems, completely replicated by Tisdale. They haven't changed the parameters for who they want to sign at all. So the manager has not obviously agreed that, there's going to be a cap at, £3 million or whatever it is. There's not a chance he would have agreed at that. Do I want Brendan running through his Rolodex making signings? Not necessarily, because Brendan is, not a particularly good judge of a player. And especially not when you look into, his previous jobs. People have, pointed out repeatedly, I think it was yourself, Paul John, it was talking about your man Ian Graham's book or whatever it was, covering Liverpool and, the selection or the transfer committee that they had. And, basically everything that Brendan wanted to do was the wrong move, right? So Brendan's not necessarily a good, but I mean, what he offers is more than we've currently got, because the problem has always been systemic. We do not have a transfer policy fit for this club. It is an absolute, we are trying to rob people blind, and we are trying to, basically, excuse the language, but it appears to be, prospects, punts and pish. And that appears to be, what Tisdale's doing. So, Brendan not having really, I mean, there was word there that they had a very frank meeting, with Brendan, Mike Nicholson, and Dermot Desmond. Within a day or so of that, Brendan's coming out with those comments. So, whatever happened in that meeting, I don't think Brendan made his point or won them over at all, because he couldn't have been any clearer about how unhappy he was. I mean, as far as managers' messaging goes, that's as blunt as I've ever seen, possibly from a Celtic manager. That is, you couldn't get any clearer than that. He is very, very unhappy about the state of play, and he doesn't appear to be able to get that turned around. He doesn't appear to be able to convince them right now that they're wrong and he's right. And if that maintains, I mean, also, you can be reading too much into it, but given the way things have happened before, and we know Brendan's not shy of a bit of politics, but, the fact that Yamada wasn't on the bench, the fact that Inamura wasn't on the bench and Yamada wasn't played and Kenny came on, I think the entire stadium saw Kenny coming on and went, what? I mean, we hadn't seen that much of Yamada, but that has to be a political move. What we have seen of Yamada, I mean, he was the top striker in Japan just over a year ago. Are we seriously saying, what league would John Kenny be the top striker in? Do you know what I mean? So he might not be in great form, but, he looked pretty good when he came on. And that sort of cameo performance that we saw, and he provides a level of pace that we desperately lack up front. And, you know, if you're talking pace, power and athleticism, we have lost, you know, Kyogo from the front line, and we have lost Kuhn, who was Champions League level pace, and at the start of last year was absolutely tearing it up. So, I mean, the myriad problems that we have are really pretty significant. And you know, it's disgusting to me that there might be this sort of ego battle going on in the background, and the price for that might be we don't qualify for the Champions League. It's absolutely pathetic. It's incredibly childish, and these guys just need to wind their necks in and get on with the job. Now, that might be completely wrong. Maybe it's not an ego battle. Maybe it's just that this is the system. This is what we agreed to. You cannot tell me that the agreed budget for this transfer window is £3 million. You know, and they have to set a budget prior to us making a sale.
Yeah.
Right. So we've taken in £30 million. We've spent 10% of that. Is that the budget? Is that what was agreed? I refuse to believe that. That's an absolute joke. It's just, and I think in this window they are in danger of genuinely breaking with the fans in a meaningful way, because if they won't push on to get into this Champions League, we know for a fact that they will not do it again the next few years. And you're basically telling people, you know, you're trying to sell Champions League packages for a lot of money or European packages for a lot of money. And what they've just said is, we are not prepared to invest in this team. We're not going to do it. £3 million, we're not going to do it. And of those £3 million that they've spent, one of those players was on the pitch. Anyway, it's like, you know, you could go on all day, and I'm pretty sure we all could go on all day about this particular issue. It is so unacceptable, and it's so depressing that we're at this conversation again.
This is the thing, John. Sometimes people say to me that, oh, what a greeting meeting and all this kind of stuff. We've got to speak about this. We absolutely do have to speak about it. And what I think happens is we get some great comments, which I'll be bringing in a moment, and they can change your perspective on things, absolutely. But I also think the discussion can. So, for example, yesterday's show, yeah, you can look on YouTube and it's got about 11,000 views, but see across all the platforms, our daily shows go out to 25 to 30,000 people, ears and eyes, right? And then you start to see conversations generated, sometimes by the discussion points that we have. And there's a lot of people maybe just sitting back thinking that, oh, you know, it's hard to get players in the transfer window and all this stuff, and believe in the hype. And I think it's important, John, when you've got a platform to challenge it. A couple of things I'm going to pick up on from your point. You were talking there about where we were the last time we played Slovan Bratislava. By the way, we might not be playing them, but I reckon we will be. But this is the team that we started with. It was Schmeichel in goals, Johnston at right back, with Taylor at left back, Carter, Vickers and Scales were your two centre halves. We then had Engels, McGregor, Hatate, and this is the big one. Front line, Kuhn, Kyogo, Maeda. That's a Champions League front line, and we don't have a Champions League front line. I would say Kieran Tierney coming in is an upgrade on Greg Taylor, absolutely. But, you know, when you look at that front line compared to what we are operating with at this moment in time, it is night and day. It's a huge drop in quality. Now, what I'll pick up on another point that John touched on there, Acsom, right? If you go back to that first transfer window under Ange, in fact, first two. So the first season, we signed a lot of players we had to, and we knew that most of them really had to make an instant impact. But when you look at the transfer fees, you're looking at, you know, 300 grand, 150 grand for the two Sheffield Wednesday boys, 3.5 for Abada, 4.5 for Kyogo. I could go through them all, but the most expensive player we signed was 4.5 for Kyogo. Now, it looks as though we have reverted back to type whereby there's a set of parameters, and they are actually set by money men, not football men. And the parameters are based on age profile because of the sell-on. They want to obviously sell them on for a profit, wages and transfer fee. Now, I remember the story. Was it Steve McGowan that broke the story, saying that there were these parameters? Mark Lawwell was working under these, restrictions, if you like. And that meant that we can only sign a certain level of player as him. Now, if you're Ange Postecoglou and you're pulling guys like Matt O'Reilly or particularly the Japanese players for such a fee, absolutely great. It looks as though it works, but it doesn't always work. And this is the issue, because if you talk to Alan Morrison, talking about data, he's talking about metrics that are all based on performance. Does this player actually fit into my team? Will they play the style and the tempo that I want them to play? Because if they don't, it doesn't matter about the parameters that the club sets. I won't play them. And this is an issue that I think we've got here. Now, John points out quite rightly that some of the new guys didn't even feature at the weekend. Yeah. Brendan has a track record of that. Go back to his first spell. I mentioned some of the names yesterday. And his second spell. If he doesn't feel that they fit, he won't play them. So for me, we're in a situation where there is ego there is control, and we do have a very conservative board when it comes to taking risks. And that's a huge issue when you really need to be in the Champions League if you want to progress as a football club.
Yeah, a couple of points, obviously, with I remember, was it Marian Shved back in his first spell where we'd signed him, and he almost acted like he didn't know about it. He spoke about, another winger. So it seems quite similar in terms of the kind of two Japanese signings. He refers to them as club signings. He likes to make it pretty obvious when it's not a Brendan signing or something he's overly enamoured with. And I wouldn't be surprised, as John says, if it was a bit of politics there at the weekend, because why Inamura, who's been performing reasonably well in pre-season, and Shin Yamada, who looked pretty bright and could offer something, was not the option to come on when we're chasing a goal. So there is potentially something in that. I look back to Roger's comments again about how he needs to try and do better to convince the board. I'm sure Ange said something very similar as well back in his first season. The question is, why, when last season we did push out a wee bit, quite a bit. We've probably spent the most we spent in one window that I can remember. 3 players costing 11, 9, 6, 26 million. I wonder if that's the stick the board are using against Rodgers, though, and the fact that they maybe feel that those players haven't proven their value. But the argument against that is, look at our Champions League performance last season. Mm-hmm. Now, people will argue how good a season Ida and Engels and Trusty all had, and I agree they were all decent. Could have been, still with a lot of room to improve. But the proof's in the pudding. We took a Bayern Munich side to a minute away from extra time. We qualified out the group phase for the first time in a long time. We had some really good performances in there. So Brendan can use that evidence to suggest that, pushing the boat out, going for a certain level profile of player worked. Now, I agree with John's point. No, is Brendan the best spot of a player? The likes of Engels, I think we've spoke about it before. I think it might have been Alan Morrison as well that said it. When you look at all his metrics and stuff, is he the perfect fit or profile of player for this Celtic team? I don't know. Look, we're a season on. We still don't know what his best position is, what he can really offer. So there is an argument there, and I wonder if that's where the issues lie in terms of Brendan's trying to prove his point, and the board basically saying, well, you were back last summer, and your eye for a player isn't particularly good, because again, 2 of those didn't start on Sunday there. So I think I think we'll get the players in. I think we will get 2 or 3 players in the positions that we need. The problem is, as John says, is it going to be too late? Is it going to be after we've potentially suffered in the playoff? We might even get away with it, but it's just a horrible situation to be going into such a massive game, having to rely on a front line that's simply not good enough 2-3 years ago, yet we're still trying it now.
No, you're right. And some great points coming through. Before I bring any of them up, Kevin Graham, I've got to say, what a beautifully modelled T-shirt that is. What a garment that is. Tell us a wee bit more. Are you wearing that because we're moving into Oasis stroke Microdot territory this weekend at Murrayfield for anyone lucky enough to be going to the Oasis gigs?
No, I just put it on because I didn't need to iron it.
Oh, nice. I'm going to use that as a tagline when promoting our merchandise. Just for that, mate. I only put it on because I did the either. Kevin, on X, just to show that we do bring up comments from other platforms other than YouTube, and also you're sporting the new Celtic crest, an updated Celtic crest. They just kind of sneaked that one in there as well. And it says, their powder keg dried up and blew away long ago. The tagline, of course, is the Celtic board keeping its powder dry until after the qualifiers? Kevin Graham, I believe, yes. That's exactly what they're doing. But you really are gambling with not only this season, but going back to the point you made earlier, a more difficult Champions League route in the future if you do that. It's short-termism. And this morning, often on a Wednesday, not every day, but on a Wednesday, John will say, right, what we're talking about kind of thing. And we batter a few ideas back and forward. I want to bring up banners because I know you, basically you were a bit of a villainous activist back in the day, and you were part of the racket that had the Scotland Shame banner. And you should get that on a big canvas somewhere, the picture of you all hoodied up. Kevin was there. Kevin was behind that. He held it up. Scotland's Shame, one of the best banners in football history. And at the weekend there, I said to John, you know, we could talk about a tale of two banners. So let's start off with the Green Brigade. A group of Celtic fans who released a video, Kev, kind of giving you an insight, and they've done this before, an insight into the work that goes into creating these incredible tifos, right? Not to mention the cost, the planning, the whole thing, the time and the effort that all these guys, I think it's all guys, if there's a few girls in there, I'm sorry. They all put this work and time and effort into it. And then what they have presented to the world, the onlooking world on Flag Day, is a work of art. It's a work of art at Celtic Park. Unbelievable tribute to John Clark and John Fallon. Take your hat off to them. Brilliant. Flip side of that is the club's banner. The club's banners that are on the outside of the football ground at the moment, which have blown off and never been replaced. And it's like the tale of the two attitudes. You've got a fan base 100% committed, Kev, into the cause, 100% committed, putting every ounce of effort and money they've got into the cause, against the board who are just sleeping at the wheel. They're just lazy. They're complacent. Oh, you know what? It's only been 7 months since they blew off the stadium. We'll get round to it. This is Flag Day. The world's watching. And the guys making the effort are the guys who are paying to be there, not the board. And I think, for me, that's quite pivotal, actually, looking at it that way, Kev. And being an activist yourself, what was your thoughts on that? It's not good enough for the club, and it's tremendous by the fans, isn't it?
Well, what you're talking about here, you're talking about the fans are always 100% committed, and that's one of the reasons that the board really think they can get away with it, because we're always going to be 100% committed, and we're always going to back the club, and we're always going to back, maybe not the club, but we're always going to back the players on the pitch, and we're always going to remember our legends. We're always going to remember the heroes, and that was perfectly shown by the Green Brigade video and the tifos at the weekend. They were absolutely the work that goes into these things it's pure art. It really is. It really is. As you say, I'm up that end, I'm up the top tier, and I know that sometimes trying to hold a banner down, if the wind's whipping in there, is complete. It can go wrong very, very quickly. And there was at one point, as I says on Monday, that I really did think the Stevie Chalmers one was going to go wrong because they couldn't get it to go down.
The John Clark one.
The John Clark one was going to go wrong. And they made a slight adjustment to it. Then the John Fallon one at half time was fantastic as well. There's a bit of laziness. I mean, when they replaced the This Is Paradise banners, it looked like they had replaced it with a corporate heading, something that you would get on a letter if they still send out letters, or at the base of an email. And I went, that's just a bit. Whereas before it was celebrating everything that we had done, the invincible treble, the treble. There was pictures of Paul, the 85 cup final, the 88 cup final, and stuff like that, and it was celebrating the club. Then all of a sudden they just went a bit corporate with it and went, oh look, here's a nice heading for us. Then you turn up on Sunday and there's still 3 banners missing. And you're going, what's going on? I thought you were maybe taking them down to change them because they could actually be doing with updating and that. Just pure laziness. But what has been sorted, the dugouts, seemingly we've got new dugouts, and some of the executive boxes have been done up.
They've got rid of the dado rails in the executive boxes, apparently.
Have they?
Yeah, they were installed in the 80s, I think.
It just shows where the priorities lie. As I says on Monday, the stadium is looking tired now. And they've got the money to do that. If they come to us by the end of this month and they've spent all the transfer fees that have came in, maybe a bit more, and they come out in September, when the financial results are due out in September, and go, right, this is what we're going to do to the stadium, this is how we're going to use the surplus of cash, I'll go, great, that's fine. But I'm more worried about, Asim was saying that he was worried about going to the Champions League qualifier. I'm worried about going to Pittodrie on Sunday with Ida, Yang and the up front. The Champions League qualifiers a couple of weeks away. I'm worried about going to Pittodrie on Sunday with them up front. And so this is why we keep on talking about this, but it could get sorted. But it should have been sorted by now. Everything should have been done by now. And I'm sure there is guys working in the background really, really hard trying to get things over the line in that, But fact of the matter is, we're going to Pittodrie on Sunday, and James Forrest is the best winger in the club.
I'm not sure there is, Kev. Just the way the manager spoke about it, I think the signings that they're looking at, obviously the manager will be aware of that, and he doesn't seem in any way impressed, and he doesn't seem happy. So whatever is going on in the background, you have to assume the manager's not happy with it. If they're working hard to get people signed, it must be people the manager is interested in, because he made that pretty clear. So they might be working hard on something, but it's not making the manager happy. And it appears, maybe they'll get a few more guys at £1 million, £1.5 million, and but I mean, I just think that was a pretty clear indication that he's not getting what he wants.
Well, one of the things there, John, if we were looking at guys at £1 million, £2 million, they'd be in the door, because it's very easy to get the boys in the door. Because you
mean there's no competition for them? That's
there's
astonishing.
No competition for them. We're looking at guys we want to come in and improve our team. We're looking at guys, right? I can understand them looking at different leagues and stuff like that, but we should be going for guys that are interested in clubs in the top 5 leagues as well, and saying to them, this is a place that you're coming to improve. And we can all argue about Engels, but the profile of Engels is the type of player that we should be looking at now. We should no longer be looking at the Slovenian second division.
Bundesliga, 20-year-old midfielder for the Bundesliga. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
You look at the guy at Go Ahead Eagles as well, though, the winger, that we were linked with, and I think we bid 1.5 million and then maybe increased it to 1.75 million. Like, the club are valuing him, his club are valuing at 6. We're not saying that go out and pay exactly what the club are wanting, but if we're valuing him at 1.5 million, is he really good enough even to be someone that we are pursuing? Now, I'm not saying that you can't get bargains. We've done that before, but you look, Rangers have signed someone from the same club for 3 million. They've got him in. They got him played last night, and he contributed in a crucial Champions League qualification from them. Now, why are we waiting this long? Why are we still shopping in that kind of market? That's the thing that just frustrates.
Want to know what I looked at when we were linked with that boy? Right away, I'm glad. The Dutch league is one of the most scouted leagues in the world because of the way that the Dutch create football players and how good their league is, right? And I'm going, the pathway for the Dutch league is either, if you've done well at one of the lesser Dutch clubs, you either go to PSV, Ajax or Feyenoord, or you go to the Bundesliga. And even the guy that we were linked with, that Ant-Man, and I'm going, well, nobody in the Dutch league is looking at them, and there's no other link to somewhere in the Bundesliga or the Belgian league. And I'm going, that says something to me that it shouldn't be the level of player that we're looking at. If we're going for a player, they should be looking at stepping up a level. And there should be top clubs that we are competing with, like your Bruges and guys like that. They should be interested in these guys as well. On the other hand, we should be going to Bruges and going, right, we want your 23-year-old midfielder because we've got the money to do it.
See, the thing, Kev, everything that we're talking about just now, I think we're on a bit of common ground. I'm going to say to you, John, even if you just look at the timeline of Mark Lowell's departure, and we call it a departure, we don't say he was emptied, sacked, because, he departed, right? So we're trying to be factually correct here. So he left the building in March 2024, and Paul Tisdale officially was appointed in October 2024. When he was in doing the day-to-day stuff is questionable, but there's a period of time, John, where we didn't have that figurehead, if you like, between the manager of the football club and those that have to be convinced to sign off deals and all this kind of stuff. And then you would guess that during that period, Brendan's just gone straight to your man, the man that signs it off. Is he going to Michael Nicholson-Ford? I don't know. I don't know what the chain of command is. And that's another argument entirely, the fact that you've got one guy at a football club that signs things off. Because if that's the case, that's why so many things don't get done. because you can't run a business like that. You've got to have the ability within separate departments to sign things off. You can't just have one over C&I, all C&I. But during that period, John, that's when we broke the club record transfer fee twice. We brought in Adam Ida for 8.5, rising to 9.5. We brought in Engels for 11, and we signed Trusty for 6. So is that buffer actually slowing things down because they're not arguing the case as strongly as Brendan would, do you think?
Well, I mean, it's clear that everyone's in different pages, isn't it? You know, and this is the issue that I was talking about earlier on. And, you know, it's an ongoing systemic problem. But, I mean, it's so difficult to believe that they're on different pages to such an extent that they didn't sit down like 6 months ago and say, this is going to be the budget for the summer. Whether or not we sell anyone, these are the kind of players we're looking at. This is the profile of player. This is who we're trying to get in. And if Brendan had a problem with it, then surely he would have spoken up. So maybe, you know, you're hoping and praying, or at least I was until Brendan made those comments, that Tisdale's doing his thing, trying to find the bargain basement bonanza, right? And then you've got. You know, there'll be a separate grade of player being looked at for Brendan who needs results now. And that's exactly what made me so happy the last window, because you're looking at Engels, young fella, you're looking at us stepping up to buy potential. And that this is the thing with people saying, oh, didn't work out quite as you want. Well, the issue is you're stepping up to buy potential at a higher level, but it is potential because we can't afford the guaranteed guys, right? So it's still potential. So it might not work out exactly as you want. But as they've both shown, right, even if it doesn't work out exactly as you want, because they're a higher grade of player, they're still able to contribute.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, whereas a lot of these other guys who bought for like $1.5 million just disappear. You know, I mean, I was, you know, it was interesting to see that, you know, the Maestro was unveiling on Flag Day, and at the same time, this is a club that signed Kwon just a year ago. You know,
the Maestro and Kwon in the same sentence.
I know, nobody ever saw that coming. So, like the Spanish Inquisition. So it's just absolutely baffling. But the thing that I think really has people, you know, upset and annoyed at this juncture is just how big of a risk this is. How stupid and short-sighted it appears. And regardless of what the dynamics are relationship-wise, it's just such a massive risk. You know, we make so much money from the Champions League, you know, and I've heard, you know, people saying before, oh, it'd be great to get a young run in Europa League because we go further. No. If we, you know, again, I think we made more money than Tottenham.
Yep.
You know, significantly more, if I remember
£10 million, I think, John. £10 million more than Spurs.
And they won it. You know, so we might go deep into it, but we make absolute peanuts in the Europa. I don't know what the conference is, but I'm sure it's even worse. Mm-hmm. But peanuts compared to, you know, you'd be losing money. I mean, that was the whole... I remember Paul Brennan started CQN on the back of where did the Seville money go? Mm-hmm. And then it was just like, well, there isn't really any Seville money, you know, and it was breaking it down like that. And that's not changed. So you might get quite far in those competitions. They're a fraction of what we get in the Champions League. And we need that money to maintain our domestic dominance.
But you say that, John, obviously we've had 3 seasons consecutively of Champions League entry and the money. We don't do anything with it. So, you know, another season of it, what's it going to make a difference? For us fans, we want to see a team that's successful on the pitch. And, you know, we've had that domestically for a number of years. And we've seen finally in Europe last season what we can do as well when we do spend. And you mentioned that it might not have went exactly how we wanted, but the 3 players, Trusty, Engels and Ida, you could argue that their best contributions were in the Champions League. Yeah. Trusty was solid against Bayern, was good in Italy against Atalanta. Engels had some of his best performances in Europe. So it worked. It did work. But yeah, you know, I'm with you. Like, you want to be in the Champions League, not just to be there and take part. You actually seen last season what we can achieve. We've got the best manager that we could ask for to try and take us to that level. He said on Friday he's not one of those that's going to just maintain. That's, you know, if that's all we're looking for, then there's no point in him being here. And it's at that point. It seems very akin to Rodgers' third season, where he said those famous words about terminado. That's kind of what Friday almost sounded like. You know, if the club aren't going to back him, if we aren't going to be as ambitious, you know, the fans are ambitious, he's ambitious. I'm sure the players, the likes of Tierney, who've came back, you know, with a view to actually playing at Europe's highest stage. But it just looks like the board aren't on the same page. And yeah, for me, I just think, yeah, Europa League, Champions League, the difference is obviously the money, but what's the point in terms of from a fan's point of view? The club just don't seem to want to spend it.
But right now, maintaining would be a target. We're not even close to maintaining.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we have gone backwards. So, you know, having that money there, and we've spoken about this before, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we don't get into the Champions League this year, I think that's probably the biggest disgrace that I can imagine in modern history for this club, because we have all the money in the world sitting there. And not only should we be trying to get into the Champions League this year and get through these games, but we should be building, if we had any vision, to strengthen the team to compete in the Champions League at a reasonable level of quality so we can get through the qualifiers. But it appears that this is what the money's for, they've already thrown the towel in. They don't think we're going to get through the qualifiers, and they don't intend to build the quality of the team to the point where that's actually an achievable goal, which is, I think, for everyone that supports the club, deeply depressing.
What Acsom said. Sorry, Kev, I'll let you go. On you go.
It's deeply depressing, but we all know they actually only budget for Europa League football. But it was something that Acsom says there, and it got me thinking. I wonder if any of them sitting, our major shareholder, who is not the owner of the club, he's just the major shareholder. I wonder if he sat there and had a look at the investment in the other clubs in Scotland. All these Americans getting involved, Tony Bloom getting involved, and I wonder if he's ever just went, why are they getting involved? Is it because they're not getting involved for the Wally Hill money? They're not getting involved for the sponsorship money. They're not getting involved for the TV money. They're getting involved because it's easy access into Europe. It's easy access to double or triple your club's turnover. Doesn't matter if you're a St Mirren or a Hearts. Hearts in the Europa Conference last year made quite a bit of money for Hearts comparatively. And if Aberdeen get in the Europa League or whatever, very much doubt it. I think they'll be lucky to stay in the Scottish Premier League, never mind getting the Europa League. Then it's easy access if you are smart and spend wisely and budget, because it doesn't matter when we're talking about coming up against teams like Bruges or Salzburg or Bratislava and that. We've got the resources that mean that should be a winnable tie, and it is easy. It's not easy access, but it's an easier route than what it should actually be with the resource that you've actually got. So I'm wondering if he's actually sat there and gone, they're thinking with smart investment, they've got access to their riches. Well, by the way, for the last 20 years, we've had access to their riches, and we've made a mess of it 13 out of the 25 years.
No, Kev, I don't think he does sit and think that. I think he sits and thinks, look at these spoilt fans moaning about the level of success we've got. And I think that's the big cultural issue that we've got at a football club. And I don't want us ever to fail. But if they do, John, if they fail to get through to the Champions League stages this season, I can see a huge uprising in the kind of thought process of Celtic fans saying we're getting taken for mugs. A lot of people already think like that. Now, let's go back to the CEO's comments about being world class. The CEO, as far as I'm aware, has addressed Celtic fans only in AGMs other than in AGMs on only one occasion, and that's when Brendan Rodgers was actually appointed as a manager and he was at that press conference. That's not good enough. He doesn't address the fans. He doesn't engage with the fans. But one thing that he did say is that we want to be world class in every department. And I'm going to ask you guys on the show today, and everybody in the comment section, we're well over 2,000 watching live across a number of different platforms. Does Celtic Football Club have a world class stadium at this moment in time? Do we have a world class academy producing young footballers? Do we have a world class recruitment department? And do we have a world-class fan base? And if of those four of them, I would say we've only got one right, and that's the fan base. We've got a world-class fan base. The rest of them, that's on the club, Kev. That's on the bean counters at the football club. And like you say, the man at the top, who's not the owner of Celtic Football Club, but who controls everything, is ultimately responsible for that.
He is,
Well,
it's like you can't own the moon, eh? See when there's some law that you can't own the room, own the moon, own the room. You can own the room, aye, but you can't own the moon. But the Chinese want to put a nuclear power station on it, and you have to put a safety zone around that so that you can own that bit of the moon. Cinema. I don't know why I started talking about the
I'm
moon.
not sure either, mate. But
I heard about that earlier on.
That's dead interesting.
And it got me thinking about Desmond, who folks is Celtic.
John's gone.
Celtic of the moon. You can't own the moon, Desmond. You can't own the moon.
There we go. You came full circle. Brilliant.
Well, can I just say about what you said there, Paul John, about Michael Nicholson? I think it may be the first time I've seen this. I've been in business quite a while. It's unacceptable, in my view, for a CEO to be anonymous. Mm-hmm. This is a man leading the club. How many leaders do you know are mute, right, when it comes to their customer base? I mean, Charlie Chaplin was more talkative than this guy. You know, I mean, it really is the silent movies. It's absolutely ridiculous that we have a CEO who doesn't speak to the fans except to ban them from the stadium. Yeah. And even that he does through proxies most of the time. So Michael Nicholson is supposed to be leading this club. We are supposed to be seeing some vision in some direction. And all we're getting is noises coming from the background about how the relationships are dysfunctional. And that's all we're seeing. We're hearing stories. That story grew arms and legs to the point where I think it's almost certainly true about those ridiculous bids that we put in. And we're seeing stories about the club embarrassing itself and embarrassing us. You know, in terms of world class, we've got world class fans like me and Acsom who are prepared to buy the merch. You know, and Kev who's turned traitor to get the Acsom merch. But you know, I put that because there was someone in the comments last week talking about boycott. And every time this time of year, we get people talking about boycotts and saying we should be platform and we need to do about a boycott. And, you know, it's absolutely ridiculous and you should be boycotting this and boycotting that. And previously, you've even seen in our own comments that there's an instant argument about that. So it just makes it, you know, makes it seem as if there's just no chance of any buy-in. And it did actually, the poll that I ran, was no 39%. It was boycott the merch, boycott attendances, or boycott both, or no boycott. And there was 39% no boycott. I'm just checking here. So there was 39%. Yeah, boycott the merch, 33%. Attendance, 4%. Both, 24%. And no boycott, 39%. So it's basically 60-40 in favour of some sort of action. Now, I always thought that you're just never going to get the buy-in from that. But I think people might consider some sort of action if we falter at this Champions League stage now, if we falter in this upcoming game, you know, I think that's you're going to really leave your fan base completely disaffected, disenchanted, and pretty depressed about the direction of the club. And if that's not the case, if there is something there for us to be optimistic about, if we have got a 5-year plan or some sort of vision or strategy that we are pursuing, where is it and why is it a secret? And why doesn't our leader tell us about it? You know, it's just the whole thing. It's like, you know, the Celtic boardroom appears to be like an old boys club or like the Lone Bowls committee. You know what I mean? It's just everything's just like a secret in here. And the rest of us are all just mug punters to be taken advantage of. It is, I think, the attitude that sometimes comes across towards fans is contemptuous, especially in their dealings with the fan groups. I think it's absolutely contemptuous. And I would add into that the reiterating they don't want to see Palestinian flags after we sparked a global movement, which every club worth its salt participated in. And then to come back to them and say we don't want to see those flags in the stadium. Well, hell mend ye. I hope every single person brings one. You know, I mean, because that's genuinely disgusting. So I think the board, the gap between what the board and the fans believe is very, very significant, and they're in danger of breaking it on a permanent basis.
The other thing is, John, though, as well, like, we're all four of us here on this show obviously are quite like-minded in our views, but when it comes to boycotts and things, I think the sad reality is, or the reality is, that not everyone's on the same page, and we've seen that plenty, and we spoke about it several times last season, Paul, John, as well, you and I, about, you know, there's plenty out there who still, you know, today will be like, well, what he's moaning about, calm down, there's still time. So the big picture is, you know, we're in I would say, I don't know in terms of how the numbers are, but I would say that there's still a large number of people who don't agree with what we're saying, who think we're maybe overly critical of the board, who think the board have done a great job all in all, and are happy with the kind of domestic dominance that we've had. So they won't support any form of boycotts. They won't support us being critical. You know, it's one of those where you can't say anything wrong against the club. So I just think that the board know that as well. They feel untouchable. You know, we've seen this year in, year out. We have these same discussions. We talk about boycotts, but it's not, nothing seems to ever change. But you're right, if we don't qualify for the Champions League this season and the other mob across the city do, then yeah, it could get back to COVID levels of anger amongst a large fan base. But look, that's hypothetical. The thing is, we could still get the signings in, we could still qualify, and in 3 weeks' time, everyone will be happy again. But the issue with that is it's always the short-term thinking. You know, it's never looking at the bigger picture, how we can be the best. You know, as Roger said, it's making the club be the best version it can be, and that's all we as fans really want. You know, it's great, obviously, that we've had this domestic dominance, but we know the club are capable of more on a wider stage. We know the club have spoke about being world class in so many aspects, yet don't seem to be doing anything about it. These are the things that you have to look at rather than just, you know, short term, or we won the league again, or you know, things are going to be all right.
You know, this one of the funniest things I've ever seen as a Celtic fan was during the COVID times. There was a dial-in fans forum, and Kev Graham took to the stage remotely. You know what's coming, Kev, and basically told the board to go have a look outside and look at the statue, Brother Walfred. What would he do, Brother Walfred? Kev, that was brilliant. I don't think you've been invited back since then. But when I seen wee Fergus at the stadium at the weekend there, I did think, what would Fergus think? And what would Fergus do in this scenario? Well, the first thing, he would go into that stadium and he would think, what on earth have you guys been doing here? You know, I mean, even the basics aren't right. You know, even the catering. I mean, we could have a whole show on this. These basic things, the main stand where he is, are not right. Toilet facilities, we all know all the issues, right? But in terms of what the actual board are doing and what the fans can do to affect that, what would Fergus do? I don't think he would be behind a boycott. He was absolutely behind it the last time because it was so strategic. Because the figures had been identified in relation to the attendance at a Celtic game. If it fell below 10,000, correct me if I'm wrong, 10,000, I think, the bank would then be alerted and be involved because we were to the tune of £5 million in debt to the bank at that stage. So that was strategic. Get it below the 10,000, get people with the counters round about the turnstiles, and then that report goes to the bank saying this club are no longer a going concern. Your £5 million is at risk. So that was strategic. I don't think Fergus would be up for that this time round, Kev. I think he would be looking at the influential shareholders within the football club to step up. And I think that those guys have got more influence in this day and age. For me, that's where I think this is going.
I'm not rewriting Fergus, right? I'm not going to rewrite Fergus. And what Fergus would be doing, he'd be going, I'm increasing the stadium, and here is a budget for players. You remember what he done with Van Hooijdonk? You remember what he done with
Remember the Stubbs story? Aston Villa tried to buy him.
Yeah, he was more making sure that the infrastructure and the business side of the club was right, and the playing side was out. That's how him and Tommy didn't get on. And we've had numerous stories about that. So, Fergus would still be arguing about a £1.5 million for a guy for Go Ahead Eagles. He would be, or he would be going like that to the football department. There's your budget, get on with it. But by the way, the majority of the budget is building the stadium to 70,000 and keeping the infrastructure up. Because, see, in the longer term, that money, the money that we get for that is more guaranteed than what we're going to get for football. for football prize money. That's what he would be doing. So no, we would still be having the same arguments. What do you mean you're trying to offer Jack Grealish £3,000 a week? Because that's what he would be doing. Stuff like Grealish had just came up in the comments here. That's how he jumped into my head there. So he would be doing that because that's what he done. He basically built the infrastructure for us.
Is he still chasing for a John Collins transfer fee?
He probably is. And so Fergus wouldn't be that different apart from the ambition that Fergus would show would be within the stadium and the infrastructure.
Fergus was a good businessman, though. He was a good businessman.
Yeah.
You know, and the times are different now in terms of what riches are available to you. So it's all relative. You know, back then the Champions League money or European football money wasn't as vast a difference, you know, in terms of the riches you can get. Fergus was shrewd with what he did. Right now, what Celtic are doing doesn't make business sense either. That's the thing. It does not make business sense that they're risking spending a few extra million to give yourself the best chance to qualify for the Champions League rather than risk missing out on what upwards of 50, 60 million euros.
Yeah.
Just to get in. It does not make business sense to me.
Yeah. It doesn't make business. And just to go back to the point that both of you made regarding Michael Nicholson, I've met Michael on quite a few occasions, and he's a decent lad. He's a decent lad, eh? But I didn't want to hear from my CEO. Just do your job. I didn't want to hear from you. Just go about, do your job in the background, and we'll only be talking about you. That's it. That's my
I think that works. I think that works if there's no unrest. But the minute that your fan base has got that level of anxiety, anxiousness, unhappiness, then I think you've got to. I think it's your duty to communicate.
I also think that only works in businesses which don't involve this level of engagement with people. So in every facet, people are bought into this. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you don't necessarily need to hear from the CEO of whoever it is that makes your shoes or, you know, all this sort of stuff. For this, which is basically, you know, fan-led, especially with the buying of merch and, you know, everything in the stadium, the buying of tickets and all the rest of it, you have to communicate with those people. You know, they are not, they are fans. I don't believe they can be, you know, I would hate to think that they're just considered to be customers, because that is not what they are. They do the same things as customers, as in they spend a lot of money, but they only do that based on their absolute passion for the club. You know, nobody's that passionate about some random brand except the guy that owns it. You know what I mean? So I think we really need to, I think it has been for a very long time a disgrace that we do not know what our ambitions are. We do not know what our medium-term, long-term, short-term ambitions are. You know, how can we not know that? You know, as fans, do we not deserve to know that?
Was that not one of the things that came at the fan forum, that they were going to? I think it was Declan. I think it was Declan that brought it up, and they says that they were going to have a 5-year plan, and it was going to be published. Declan might come back and completely shirk me for that, but I'm sure they says that we were going to do that. Like the Japanese have got a 100-year plan that they're going to win the World Cup at some point in that. So we're still waiting on the results of the Gordon Strachan review, and we're still waiting. We're still waiting on the results of that 5-year plan, which they promised the fans forum.
Did we ever get the Dubai review? I don't think we got the Dubai review either.
No, we never got that. We never got that. I think that was the drinks bill was all right for the Dubai review. And that was kept under wraps.
100-year plan, and they're 30 years into it, Kev. It's incredible. We need more engagement. We're pretty unhappy with the way things are going. Just looking at Fergus McCann's last transfer window as the CEO of Celtic. Back then, we signed Mark Viduka for £3 million. We signed Johan Mjalby for 1.4, Vidar Riseth for 1.4, and a wee guy called Lubomir Moravcik for 370 grand. We spent more money than we brought in. Interesting, that, isn't it? We did get 600 grand back in for David Hanna. Times have changed. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Well over 2,000 still on the live stream just now. We could sit and talk for a long time about some of these frustrations. So thanks for getting involved, and thank you to Kevin Graham, Acsom Rabbani, brilliant to see you again, mate, and John Hughes for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.